Shalom. Welcome back to my home in the old city within the walls of Jerusalem. Today, I want to tell you a fabulous, amazing story. It's a story that is about one of the characters in the story is about Rav Chaim Kanievsky. We spoke about him last week. He left this world a week ago last Friday on Shushan Purim. And I said at the time that he was a gadol meaning a great one in Israel. It doesn't refer just like to intellectual greatness. Intellectually, yes, he was a genius. Yes, every year he completed the learning of the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud and the Zohar, the basic text of Jewish mysticism, and many other, like all the basic works of Judaism. But he was even more than that. He was a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone who is so close to Hashem, to God, that they see things that we don't see. According to Kabbalah, there are 4 worlds. There are actually many subdivisions of the 4 worlds, but in any case, we're down here in the bottom of all the worlds, the lowest of all worlds, the physical world. But a tzaddik can see other levels and know what's going on in other worlds. And even here in this world, they can look at a person and they just look through them and see their soul. I experienced this myself. I wrote the book Holy Woman about Rebbetzin Chaya Sara Kramer. Here is the book. And by the way, you can buy all of my books. They're down there in the notes. The link to buy any of my books. But I experienced personally. I went to her when I was 2 months pregnant, when no ultrasound could pick up the gender of a child, of the baby, of the fetus. And she looked at me and said, "Oh, it looks like a boy," because she was seeing the soul. In any case, this is a story about Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who had that ability to see what the rest of us cannot see. And it's a story about a young man named Amit Ben Yigal, a young Israeli boy, young man. He was the only child of his father. And at some point, probably the end of high school, he went to see the concentration camps, the death camps in Poland. And he wrote to his father, texted his father. He said, "Abba, Dad, you're the son of a Holocaust survivor. Your dad didn't have an army to protect him. Today, now that our people have a country, I want to do everything I can to protect it at all costs. I want to enlist in the Golani Brigade." Golani is a combat unit of the IDF. Well, his father obviously did not want him to do that because he was the only child. The law in Israel is that if someone is an only child, the parents he does not get drafted into a combat unit. And in fact, if he really wants to go to a combat unit, then his parents have to sign off on it. And it's the same thing if someone has lost a child, either in the army or in a terror attack, then the remaining children cannot go into a combat unit. We're not taking any chances. The family has already lost one child. And the parents, if they have to, if the child really, really, really insists and convinces the parents, they have to sign to let him go in to a combat unit. So when Amit came home, he argued with his father for 2 months because his father didn't want him to jeopardize his life going into a combat unit. But he insisted because he wanted so badly to protect the Jewish people. Having seen the death camps of the Holocaust, he wanted to do everything he could to protect his fellow Jews. So in the end, his father, Baruch, signed on. He allowed him to enlist in the Golani Brigade. And in May of 2020, Amit was in an Arab village at night, arresting terrorists with his brigade. The operation was virtually completed, and someone dropped like a heavy cinder block from a roof right down on Amit's head and killed him. So at some point, his father, his bereft father, Baruch ben Yigal, went to see Rav Chaim Kanievsky. He was not, by the way, he was not Haredi, so-called ultra-Orthodox. I don't like that word, like as if you're too much Orthodox, but he didn't wear black and white. He wore a knitted kippah, came from a different stream of Jews. But he went to see Rav Chaim Kanievsky, as many people did. You didn't have to be in his camp to venerate him and want his blessing. So his father, Baruch, went and he presented himself, stood in line. It was his turn. Rav Chaim hadn't been told who anybody was. And Rav Chaim's grandson, Yanki, said, pointing to, it was Baruch's turn to see the gadol. He said, do you know who this is? He was wearing a mask for COVID. So Rav Chaim told him to put down the mask, and he looked at him and he said, this is the father of a Jewish hero. And Baruch later said his knowledge of who I was astounding. Like nobody had told him who I was. And I was wearing, he said said this on Israeli television. He said, I was wearing my son's dog tag. And Rav Chaim took the dog tag in his hand and he started to cry. And he said, I want you to know that your son is as close as possible to the Kisei HaKavod. The Kisei HaKavod means the divine throne. We have to use anthropomorphisms to describe, and we're talking about the highest world. We're talking about the place where souls go after death, the world of souls. And what happens after death, and would take many of these YouTube videos to really get into this subject. But briefly, what you get in the next world, according to our deeds, is we get closeness to the light of the divine presence. And the better we have been as people, as human beings, as Jews, the closer we are to the light of the divine presence, to the divine throne. And Rav Chaim said to the father of Amit, he said to him, your son is as close as possible, as close as anyone can be to the Kisei HaKavod, which was like amazing. And then he said, your son is now with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the author of the Zohar, the author of the great Jewish mystical ideas. He was a Talmudic sage who lived 2,000 years ago. And in fact, Amit had been killed on the yahrzeit, on the day of the death of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, which is Lag BaOmer. And Rav Chaim said he is now with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva, probably the greatest of the Talmudic sages. And here's a young man who chose to risk his life to save Jews. And Reb Chaim said to him, this is where your son is, as close as possible to the Kisei HaKavod, with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Akiva. So Baruch, the father, was astounded, and he left Reb Chaim's presence. Didn't quite know what to do with it. Was Reb Chaim just saying that to try to console him? Could it be true? So he went to fill up his car in Ramat Gan. Ramat Gan is a city right next to Bnei Brak, where Reb Chaim lives. He went to a gas station to fill up his car. And while he was filling up his car with gas, a woman came over to him and she said, you're the father of Amit ben Yigal. And he said, yes, I am. And she said, I had a dream of him. And Baruch said, what was the dream? And she said, In the dream, he was as close as could be to the Kisei HaKavod, the divine throne, and he was with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Akiva. So I wanted to share that story with you because it has so many elements, but the fact that Rav Chaim could see it, could see where this soul was in the next world, could see his eminence in the next world, and his eminence so astoundingly high. Ordinary Israeli boy, I'm saying ordinary with quotes, who was willing to risk his life, as thousands are every year, to defend the Jewish people. And he was killed, and that's where he ended up. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that these stories will inspire us to know that there is another world, and there are mysteries that we have no access to, but thank God we have great souls who do have access to all those deeper and higher visions.